Today, we're going to talk about anxiety and how to find relief from anxiety naturally using the very simple principles from Ayurveda. The word Ayurveda is not a word you hear every day. So some of you may know what Ayurveda is, and some of you may not. Ayurveda is a Sanskrit word that translates to the science of life. So Ayur literally translates to life, and Veda translates to ancient knowledge or science. So Ayurveda is the science of life, is a system of medicine that's been around for thousands of years that helps explain anxiety in a very simple way. So when I first learned about Ayurveda many years ago, I had just had a baby. She was about a year old, and we had just moved to Toronto from Boston. I remember at that time feeling very disoriented, somewhat angry and nervous. I was dealing with issues inside my family and my marriage, and I was dealing with being a new mom, trying to adjust to what that meant and to take care of this little new human in the world. So I'd enrolled into classes on Ayurveda, and I remember we would get into class, sit on the floor, and learn in traditional yogi style with our legs crossed. I remember the day we learned about anxiety. It's like something in my mind clicked and it made sense to me. I realized that I had been dealing with anxiety my entire life. I just never really knew what it was or how to identify it. I definitely heard of it before, but when I got connected to how to identify and recognize the anxiety from the perspective of Ayurveda, it made a huge difference for me. Understanding where it comes from and how it feels in my body gave me power to understand what was happening and how to manage it. And so I'm here sharing with you in hopes that this information makes a difference for you. So let's define anxiety. Now, when I say define anxiety, what I mean is let's look how we can better understand it and what that means. We're going to talk about anxiety inside the context of fear, because fear is something we're all familiar with. We've all been in situations where we experience fear, right? So what are some situations that cause or elicit fear for you? I'd love to ask and hear from you. What are some of those things that elicit fear?
Think a lot of simple things like public speaking.
Mm-hmm. Public speaking is a big one, right?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, what triggers me is, just before a flight is about to take off, and I know that I'm going to be up in the air and not grounded anymore.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? Okay, so those are really great examples. And what sort of sensations do you feel when you start to experience that fear?
I start to freeze up, like even you almost like everything that you had known about before just completely evaporates in your mind. And
Mhm.
your palms get sweaty, your heart starts to beat really fast.
So your hands start to get sweaty, you might freeze, your heart starts to beat fast, maybe you start to sweat, right? Your breathing becomes shallow. So we've all dealt with situations that bring up fear, right? We've all had this fear response before. Fear is the body's response to danger or imminent threat. So in the case of public speaking, right, there's no real danger or imminent threat, but it feels like that because your thoughts are telling you like to be scared, right? It's like, and it feels like a real fear in your body, and it brings up sensations that are real. The sweating is real, the heart racing is real. This response of our body is a natural response designed to keep us safe. The fear response has evolved to keep us out of danger and to keep us alive. Now, the difference between fear and anxiety is the body's fear response to thought without any imminent threat or danger. So essentially, the body gets stuck in a fear response as a result of simply the thoughts that we think. So an example of that could be public speaking, right? There's no literal threat or danger, but the body reacts as if there is one. And same thing with an airplane. When you're about to take off, there's no real threat or danger in front of you. However, something you might have heard on TV, read on the news, or seen in the past has caused your thoughts to start to race, and your body experiences the fear. So we all have thoughts like this from time to time, and maybe sometimes more often than others. It's totally normal. But when does this anxiety become a problem? So it becomes a problem when it interferes with living your life, right? With earning a living, with performing at work or at school, when it interferes with your relationship and creating and maintaining social bonds and social ties. Today, we're going to talk about anxiety from the perspective of Ayurveda. And in order to do that, I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about Ayurveda. So, what is Ayurveda? Ayurveda is an ancient Indian system of medicine that's been around for over 5,000 years, and it literally translates to the science of life. You may be familiar with yoga, and Ayurveda and yoga are sister sciences. So Ayurveda is the medicine, and yoga is the practice of that medicine. People spend lifetime studying Ayurveda, and we're going to talk about this very briefly today. I'm going to give you some very simple and relevant concepts of Ayurveda that will help you understand anxiety. In Ayurveda, there are 5 elements or Panch Mahabhuta. Those are air, water, space, fire, and earth. In Ayurveda, all of life is made up of those 5 elements, and that includes our bodies. So if you look at our bodies are made up of a combination of those 5 elements in varying degrees. So we all have differing combinations of those 5 elements. So you could describe somebody as having more water, having more fire, right? Having more air. And Ayurveda combines those elements to create doshas. So let's talk about these doshas briefly for a moment. So one of those doshas, there's 3 doshas. There's one of them is Vata, there's Pitta, and there's Kapha. So Vata is made up of the air and space element. Now, people who have more air and space in their constitution are people who would be more creative, are full of ideas. You might see them, having a lot of energy, like an energy burst or sporadic energy, where they have a lot of energy and then they don't because they're kind of tuckered out. They move around a lot. So they're like kind of going from here to there, to there, to there, like the idea of a social butterfly, this butterfly, which moves from here to here, to there, to there, is a Vata, sort of a personality trait. Vata controls the movement in the body, and it sits in the colon. So when you have a balanced Vata, you have a lot of ideas, creative ideas, you have good movement in the body. Imbalances could lead to pain in the body. So people with arthritis, pain in the body, flatulence, and anxiety are a form of imbalanced Vata. Okay, somebody who is Pitta and who has more Pitta in their constitution. These people are more, in their body, they're more of a athletic type build. So they have good muscles, like well-formed muscles. They have great digestion. They need to eat on a regular basis. If they don't eat, they get hangry, right? We all know people like that. They have a sharp mind. They're driven. They may be hot-tempered. They also normally have good, like nice glowing skin if they're in a balanced state. If they're in an imbalanced state, they might deal with acid reflux. They might deal with rashes and red skin, maybe indigestion. And Pitta sits in the belly. It's responsible for the transformation of all the food into our bodies. So it's responsible for that fire in the belly. Okay, and people who are predominantly Kapha, their body type is a little more heavy set, right? They may really like to lounge. They really like to relax. They don't move too quickly, but when they do move, they're steady. They have good endurance. So this is somebody who's going to run, like if they're going to run a marathon, they're going to run the marathon. Somebody who's Vata with more air and space, they can run very quickly for a short period of time, and then they got to stop. Somebody who's more Kapha, they're like the marathon endurance runners, right? They tend to be loyal. They tend to be affectionate in their constitution. Kapha is responsible for the nourishment of the body. It sits in the thorax of the body, responsible for the lungs, the heart, the head. Balanced kapha would result in somebody who's loyal, kind, nourishing, big eyes, bright skin. An imbalance in kapha would result in an more weight, overweight, being overweight, depression, lethargy. So really not wanting to move. So now in Ayurveda, our goal is to bring the body back into a state of balance, and we can do that using the 5 elements. So we do this naturally all the time. So in the summertime, when you're out and you're exercising, you're in the sun, what we naturally do is we gravitate towards cooling foods and cooling liquids, right? So we come in, we might get a cold glass of water with ice. We gravitate towards salads, raw veggies, air conditioning. In the winter time, when it's cold outside and you come in from the cold, we gravitate normally and naturally towards hot foods. So we want hot soup, warming liquids, hot teas, spicy foods. Now, specifically for anxiety, we would use those same concepts to balance the imbalance that leads to anxiety. So as I said, a balanced Vata shows up as creativity, flowing ideas, also like bowels that move on a regular basis, right? Free flowing movement of the joints, blood, and lymph. And as I said earlier, an imbalanced Vata could lead to flatulence, arthritis, pain, and anxiety, to name a few conditions. So how does anxiety feel in the body according to an imbalance of Vata, right? So there's an imbalance of air and space. Usually there's a lot of movement in the head area. So you might notice that you sort of feel scattered. You can't quiet your thoughts or your mind. Now, as I said, anxiety is an imbalance of Vata. I've said that a couple of times, an imbalance of air and space. The imbalance can come from the inside, internal, and it can also come from the external. So the air element is rough. It moves, think of wind. So when you're doing things that mimic that quality of air element, for example, if you're multitasking, trying to do 5 things at once, or maybe you're traveling quite a bit. Have you ever noticed that when you travel, your bowel movements are not as regular? That is an imbalanced air and space element, or an imbalance in Vata. Things that exacerbate or mimic the quality of air and space in excess cause an imbalance that leads to an imbalanced Vata. So anxiety specifically can be exacerbated or made worse by that excess air element. So multitasking, as I said, if you're traveling a lot for work, if you're in your car a lot, even if you're thinking about doing a whole bunch of things at once, or maybe you're actually doing a whole bunch of things at once. Someone who is always on the go, that's having a lot of movement in their life, maybe in your environment, things are scattered in your room or in your house and things are sort of all over the place. That can exacerbate Vata. Even on a cold, windy day, or even a cool, windy day, like the fall is a perfect example of the environment that can be cold, like cool and windy. Do you ever notice you come in from the outside and your head might hurt and you might feel a little bit spacey? That's an increase in Vata, which can exacerbate Vata, leading to an imbalance. You can find out your own dosha. We have a quiz that's here attached to this video, or you can find it in a link. And you can find out what dosha are you right now predominantly. So that's what the quiz will tell you.